Does talking about your money make you cringe? Are you tired of fighting about finances? Do you want to stop sabotaging your financial happiness? Then you are in the right place. Welcome to Breaking Money Silence, a podcast series aimed at helping all of us talk more openly about money. Your host, Kathleen Kingsbury, is doing what she does best. As a young girl, she was scolded for talking too much to her neighbors in class. After years of trying to be quiet, she discovered that speaking up about taboo topics is her strength. International speaker, author, and founder of KBK Wealth Connection, Kathleen understands money and our relationship with it. She is a wealth psychology expert who has helped thousands of advisors and clients communicate more effectively about money. Now, listen to Kathleen as she assists today's guest in busting their favorite money myth wide open.
I want to welcome Ken Lizotte to the podcast today. I know Ken quite well, have known him for several years, but let me tell you about his credibility, which is very large when it comes to authoring books and helping people become thought leaders in their field. Ken has authored 7 books, including his most recent, The Speaker's Edge, the ultimate go-to guide for locating and landing lots of speaking gigs, and The Expert Edge, become the go-to authority that people turn to every time. Ken Lizotte is the Chief Imaginative Officer at the Emerson Consulting Group in Concord, Massachusetts. It's a consulting firm that transforms speakers and consultants into thought leaders by helping them write and publish their ideas as articles and books. Ken is a regular speaker at business events, and he's been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, NPR, Fortune Magazine, Business Week, Writer's Digest, and Investor Business Daily. He also pens a column for the Huffington Post. Like I said, Ken and I have worked together for years, so it's with a great honor to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. I know many people know you by Kathleen Kingsbury, but I know you by KBK, so is that okay if I call you that?
That is absolutely fine, Ken, and sometimes I prefer it, so that's great.
You are KBK Wealth Connection after all.
I am. So I know today we're going to have a conversation that we really haven't had in the past, which is about breaking a money myth. And you brought a really interesting one to the show. So can you tell the listeners what myth you want to bust open today?
I'm thinking about the myth that people have, or businesses particularly have, is that they really ought to maximize their profits by keeping their costs as low as possible. And I think that's a myth, because for reasons we'll discuss. But just the idea that you should have the highest possible profits, that's the be-all and end-all of business, I think is a big money myth.
Which is really interesting because working in the financial services field as a consultant, certainly I know a lot of people in that realm would definitely say, well, that's not a myth. Of course you want to keep your business costs low so you can maximize profits. So tell me a little bit about what motivated you to pick that myth.
Well, the key to me is not just keep your costs low. I think that's a fair goal, but it's the idea of keeping them as low as you possibly can, and which I think what's been important to me over the course of my business career is to invest as much as I can in, let's say, added services or consulting that will help me grow and improve and things of that sort. And so when you try to just minimize your costs as much as you possibly can, then you're often making decisions not to spend money where you technically don't have to. So to me, that's short-sighted, and there are lots of examples. As approaching this podcast, I started thinking about examples that have to do with not only myself, but with clients of mine and also other businesses, other industries. So I think it's really worth considering that maximizing your profits to the nth degree is not necessarily the best choice in business. Nor do I think it will end up maximizing your profits in the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you brought up this topic, the first thing that came to mind for me in terms of my own experience is, at the very beginning of KBK Wealth Connection, really trying not to spend any money on any virtual assistants or anybody who might, help me with my schedule or do something that, in quotes, right, I could do myself. And what I
Right.
found is that the moment I finally relinquished control and said, maybe people could help me so I could spend more time doing what I do, the absolute best, which is writing and consulting and speaking, that I might actually be a happier person. And ultimately, it actually maximized my profits or is continuing to maximize my profits. So that's an example that comes to mind for me. Is that what you're talking about? And also, do you have other examples you can throw out there for people to start to understand this myth?
Sure. Well, you are one of the examples that kind
Uh-oh.
of came to mind, because we met years ago because one of your friends who had been a client and still is a client of mine sent you to me. And the reason why she was a client and the reason why you came to me was that both of you had the insight to want to separate yourselves from your competition rather than just sort of beat your head against the wall trying to better your competition. And the form that it took was the service that I offer, which is to help people position themselves as thought leaders, particularly by writing and publishing a book. And you, of course, have gone on, and now it's your third published book. I think your fourth, if you count everything you've done.
No, Ken, I'm on number 5.
You're on number 5.
Number 5.
Who
And
can count?
yeah, no, but I just turned it in today. So excited about that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But you could see that investing in putting together a book, investing money, but also investing yourself, your time, your resources, which is something you do with this podcast as well. And a lot of people don't think in those terms. They don't think how could they maximize profits by maximizing their the extent to which they win over their competitors by standing out from the crowd. And so, as I say, you're one of my examples because not everyone thinks in terms of investing in becoming a thought leader the way you do and have done, and the way many of my clients do, and frankly, the way I do.
Well, and the other thing that comes to mind, and I know from looking at your more detailed bio that you've done coaching as well, I think another area where people often say, well, why would I spend the money to hire a coach? And I know, your coaching is around writing and thought leadership. There's all sorts of different coaches. Have you ever ran into that personally for yourself and had some reluctance to spend some money on coaching to get to the next level, or maybe have seen, other people you've worked with do that? Because I know that's a big roadblock for a lot of business owners.
Right. Well, I think what I did early on was not so much one-on-one coaching, getting a coach for myself, although a lot of people really seem to benefit from that. But I always invested a lot in going to programs and hearing speakers and becoming a member of organizations where I'm going to get some sort of informal coaching from colleagues and things of that nature. And I think that, again, that's the type of thing that particularly us consultants need to always be doing as much as we possibly can. But as regards to your question in particular about a coach, the truth is, and I think this speaks to maybe what you have to be careful about in terms of what I'm saying with this money myth. I was always reluctant to get a one-on-one coach. I was always afraid that if I went down that road, that I might get a coach who wasn't very good. I'm really good at thinking things through myself. It just comes naturally for me to do that. And in combination with investing in learning by reading books and listening to speakers and going to programs, as I mentioned before, I always feel as though I can think my way out of things. So, but finally, there came a point when there was he was really a colleague in an organization that I'm a member of, And he was starting out as a coach. And I was kind of holding him back as far as he was trying to press on me to become a client of his. I liked the guy, and I sort of gave in. It was against my better judgment. It really was. I still felt like I didn't really want to, but I also thought, well, maybe it would work. And it didn't work. He wasn't that good. And so it soured me, or maybe it confirmed for me that coaching, that particular model, for me, wasn't the right thing. So that's not to say that my lesson is my experience is the same for everybody, but for me, it wasn't the right thing. So I think what I'm saying is it's not about investing in just anything and everything. There are choices to make, and you have to trust yourself in terms of what you invest in that can make sense. But maybe it's a matter of don't be afraid to invest in something because you think it's going to cost money or more money than you want to spend. Try not to do that, because when you do that, it can warp, I think, your decision as to whether or not that investment would, in the long run, quite potentially, truly maximize your profits.
Well, and what's interesting about that from a wealth psychology perspective is it's if you think about always paying less, or what's the least amount that I can spend, there is a way in which there's a scarcity mentality. So what I've found with myself, and certainly people that I've worked with, both on a personal level as well as a professional level, is that if you start to invest in yourself, there's a way, and doing so wisely, I think that's important. Every program, every coach, every, publisher, whatever it is, isn't for everybody. So really kind of strategically thinking about those things. But what I find is that when people don't want to invest at all in themselves, what ends up happening is they stay very restricted and very small. And in some ways, a lot of times people end up being under earners. There's huge potential. But if you can't step outside yourself and say, how am I going to get to the next level, then you ultimately, I don't think, get to the next level. Now, outside of you and me, do you have other examples of how people who buy into this myth that keeping business costs as low as possible maximizes profits, how that can get in the way for somebody as a business owner or even as a person?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is something I came across the other day that I was reading an article, and it's more the positive response to breaking this money myth, and that is that. So I was reading this article in the Boston Sunday Globe magazine the other day. And it was about UPS. It was about road rage, actually. And the journalist was realizing that she was not the best driver in Boston either. It was about Boston drivers and how a lot of people complain about Boston drivers, but she was about to make a ridiculous move at a traffic signal, and she said, "Hey, I'm one of these too." So she decided to learn more about driver safety and good driving and effective driving. So she wrote an article where she not only interviewed people at UPS, but got taken around Boston, driven around by the director of safety for UPS in the Boston area. And he was showing all sorts of effective techniques for driving that were not going to be dangerous to the driver or to other cars. But he was talking also about how UPS puts an enormous amount of money into safe driving for their drivers. It's a high cost for them, but they feel as though by having safe drivers, ultra safe drivers, they will keep their accident levels down. And that will save them money, but they also acquire a reputation as a company that, when it's delivering our packages, they're going to be safely transported. So I think if you look at the flip side of that, and you have a company that's I don't know about the major companies, But if you're maybe a smaller company and you're trying to maximize your profits, if you're a transport or delivery, package delivery company of some kind, something like that, but you're not investing in your drivers, maybe you're just trying to get, hire the best drivers with the best records or something, then what UPS's attitude is that the likelihood is that you're going to not have the stellar reputation that they want to have, and you're not going to keep your costs down. Therefore, that impacts your profits, maximizing your profits.
Well, and your brand and what you want the world to think of you as so
Right.
valuable in terms of your, long-term sustainable business.
Yeah.
So if we just, in a couple words, if you could reframe this. So if somebody out there is listening and says, wow, I've really always bought into that idea that I'm supposed to keep my costs as low as possible. Is there another way of thinking of it, or another mantra, maybe that you've used for yourself, or we can come up right now, that they can replace it with? Because often there's a money myth and then it's like, oh, so how do I reframe that? What would the
Right.
reframe be?
What comes to mind is invest in yourself and invest in your company. In go beyond the minimal investments and look for ways to expand. This whole leading up to this podcast also got me thinking about another client of mine whose name, I'll just say his name because it's a positive story. His name is Dan Cassidy. He's out here in the Boston area, and he's an investment consultant, actually. And he's always had a healthy viewpoint of investing in his people. So he's perfectly fine with sending them to like seminars and courses and whatever it is that might help build them up, and therefore builds his team up. But the other side of that is that he has found occasionally that by having this attitude or this benefit for his people, that he can spot somebody who's not being the best person to represent him. And I'm thinking back to a time when he had brought somebody on to his company, and he kept recommending books for this gentleman to read, and the guy wouldn't read them. It'd be in a meeting, and he'd say, "Well, how was that book I gave you, a couple of weeks ago?" And he'd say, "Well, I didn't really get to it." So that guy didn't really last very long in his company, because Dan was able to spot that this wasn't really the right person for me, and in that sense, the lack of investment. In this case, Dan's worker, the lack of investment indicated that this was a drawback to his team, and that he should get rid of them.
Right, right. So if somebody's listening in, whether they own a company like you and I do, or whether they're a leader, or whether maybe they work for somebody else, what advice would you give listeners to kind of combat this myth? One or two tips on what they can do to kind of bust this myth wide open in their own lives.
Well, it's often recommended, if you read books on marketing, or you talk to marketing departments or companies that have a strong marketing department, that there should be a budget set aside every year for marketing purposes, and maybe a budget set aside for investment purposes is one of the things to think that you would do ahead of time. So I think setting aside a certain amount, whether it's 5% of your income or whatever it might be, or a set dollar amount, might be a good idea ahead of time, and then look for ways to spend it. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is, I kind of harken back to what we were talking about before. Be careful that you don't take this advice to just invest in anything and do anything, and heed my warning with the story of the coach, where I didn't pay attention to my own sense about it, that it didn't feel like it was going to necessarily reap rewards for me. And pick and choose, but pick. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and with the coach example, I mean, sometimes this happens, and I've learned a lot about where to invest in my business and in my people by making bad hiring decisions, trying to do something that other people were doing that I thought, oh, I should do that as well. Quickly investing and then saying, oh, this isn't really me. So I think there needs to be some acceptance that it's not going to be a perfect road, but I like those tips. So budget for marketing and personal growth. It sounds like the other one was trust your gut and know that sometimes it's not going to go perfectly, but that's okay. That's part of the process of figuring out how to do it better going forward.
Right. You can't always know that something's going to work or you're going to get a return on investment for everything, but you don't get a return on investment for anything in the realm of investing in yourself if you don't try anything.
Exactly. And so, as we wind down and have you tell listeners a little bit about where they can find you, I'm brought back to this image of me sitting at my desk the first time I was trying to decide, am I going to work with Ken? At the time, the investment felt very large for me. And so I can remember going back and forth and finally saying, you know what? What's the worst thing that can happen? And I wrote out the check. We started the process. And who would have known? It's almost been 10 years, and 3 books later. And it seems to have worked out for me. So I am case in point, somebody who believes in your message. So where can people who are interested in learning more about you find out more about your services? And then I also know that you have a non-profit project that you've worked on that's near and dear to your heart that I want to make sure you have time to mention.
Sure. Well, the website is thoughtleading.com. That's like thought leadership, only it's an active verb, ing, thought leading. And so it's thoughtleading.com. And if you go there, you'll see we have a menu of our services, and both books that you had mentioned early on. And then as far as the project that's near and dear to my heart, it was a book that I shepherded through, guided through the past 4 months. It was a self-published book. I'm president of the board of trustees at Thoreau Farm, which is the birthplace of Henry David Thoreau. And in this particular year, with all the issues that are at stake, particularly in relation to the way the new administration is handling things, we of the board of Henry David Thoreau's birthplace decided that our contribution might be to gather a collection of scholars and authors and citizen activists and just anyone who might have something to contribute to a collection of essays under our title, What Would Henry Do? If he were alive today, what would he think? What would he say? What would he do? And we've got some amazing people that are in this collection, including Jimmy Carter, who contributed an essay to us. So this is called What Would Henry Do? And you can find it on Amazon, and you can find it in Barnes & Noble. But this is an example of if you were wanting to position yourself as a thought leader. By the way, it's important to know that this was a self-published book, and self-published books are that process is a good option here too, along with the other option of deciding to find a publisher to work with. And that's how we did this book. But that's what it's called, What Would Henry Do? So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ken. I hope people check out your website, thoughtleading.com. Also, he has several books, but both the recent books are on Amazon, The Speaker's Edge and The Expert's Edge. And definitely, I want to check out this book of What Would Henry Do? Given everything that we're dealing with today, I could certainly use a little inspiration.
It's in the mail. It's in the mail.
It's in the mail. Excellent. I get a gift for you being on my podcast. This really works out well, Ken. I like this relationship. Thank you so much for your time today. And everybody, please, like I said, check out Ken's work and tune in again for Breaking Money Silence.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Money Silence, hosted by Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, a wealth psychology expert and founder of KBK Wealth Connection. If you like what you heard, then check out more podcasts at breakingmoneysilence.com or subscribe on iTunes.com. Need a fun, engaging speaker for your next event? Go to kbkwealthconnection.com and find out how to book Kathleen today. Be sure to share today's show so together we can break money silence for good.